Hello, everyone. This is Khyron. Basically, I'll be doing my presentation bit on the Singapore side to give you an insight into the opportunities and the growth around the Singapore region. All right, how you can branch out your business to Asia from here. Together with me, I have Evgenia, who is my colleague for the Russian correspondent. She's in charge of the corporation services and setup. So if you have any questions that you prefer to ask in Russian, she'll be here to assist as well. Evgenia, maybe you can do a bit of introduction.
Добрый вечер, уважаемые слушатели. Меня зовут
Good afternoon, dear listeners. My name is Evgenia. I'm a part of Khyron Group. Have been a part of Khyron Group for 4 years. I've been dealing with opening bank accounts, registration issues. If you have any questions in Russian pertaining to all of the aforementioned transactions, please don't be embarrassed to ask them during the Q&A and also in the chat. I'll be glad to translate them for Khyron. Thank you very much.
Okay, basically our company has helped companies and clients like yourself or your clients to do setup in all over the region here in Singapore. So generally, we deal a lot with high net worth clients, business owners, even some corporations with a high number of shareholders who are looking at doing a bit more complex structure setup. So we live in a very difficult and also unusual time, I have to say. So there's this COVID situation as well as this situation in compliance. So I'm here to actually address both of these issues to see how we can help you overcome them. All right, all these challenges with our experience. So generally, I myself is doing regulation work. All right, I have actually done a lot of compliance work over the years with the banks, and I myself is basically trained in tax work. So since my days with Ernst & Young and now with my own firm, I've done a lot more advisory work, especially on cross-border tax situations. All right. So once we get to understand a little bit more on Singapore, then I can actually showcase a bit more on how some of this structure can work for you. Okay. This is basically a Singapore landmark that is quite popular. All right. This is our Marina Bay Sands with our Merlion. So generally, this is something that for a lot of tourists and a lot of newcomers who haven't been to Singapore, this is usually the site that we will greet them with. Okay. Now, Singapore itself is an island, all right, but it's quite densely populated island. But we have actually quite a robust travel connections with most of the countries, as you can see here, all right, pertaining to Europe, Russia, and even all the way to the States. So we have direct flights. It's just that at the moment, of course, under this current situation, traveling can be quite restricted. So, but most of the business, as you can see, we have clients from all this region, whereby they come to Singapore to do the setup and basically use Singapore as a headquarters, as a base to channel more business around the Asia region. And to introduce some places in Singapore, these are some of the also very famous landmarks, right? Gardens by the Bay, Raffles Place, which is our commercial district. All right, Orchard Road is our most popular shopping district. So airport and Singapore River, these are all the town areas. Generally, I think Singapore is quite a well-developed city. We are also a financial hub, all right, for most businesses. Most of the banks, as well as Swiss banks, they are all based here as well. Okay, now we also have global investors. All right, just to give you some idea, we are not new, all right, to most people. So a lot of these foreigners actually they have come here, settled down with their businesses, all right, including Russians, Evgeny Kaspersky, and Sergei Belosov. So these people actually they have settled down quite early back in those early 2000s. So their businesses are quite established. So they have also grown the Russian communities as well. So overall, we have a good sizable community from foreigners, and we have Singaporeans, our own local people, who are also well versed with foreigners, doing business with them. Okay, just to give you some economic data about Singapore. Yeah, if you're familiar with the country, I think doing business here is nothing new as well for most people. So we are also ranked in the top 10 in terms of our economic capability. All right, we also export technology. We do international banking. We are proud to say that we are actually on par with a lot of these new developments in technology as well as in business practices. Okay, and we are also having a lot of these corporate giants here, mainly the banks, as well as the financial institutions. Wealth planning is one of the most common industry and most robust wealth planning schemes that we have here in terms of the tax benefits. So in terms of attracting companies from overseas to invest, we are also one of the most popular jurisdictions to consider. All right. So as you can see, some of this data would showcase we are always constantly within the top 10, top 50. So my focus here today actually is more on the wealth planning. All right, for clients who are considering doing a little bit more of the high level planning, okay, for investments, we are definitely very suitable for that. Later on, I will showcase some of the interesting tax structures that we have developed over the last 2 years, as well as to answer some of your concerns about the situations with doing business under the COVID situation. Okay, so over the years, we have constantly investments coming in terms of fund management, in terms of property investments, as well as stocks and bonds. We have also come into the stage where we also deal a lot with cryptocurrency investments. The fintech business here is also growing, especially with the influence from China and East Asia. Definitely, there's going to be a lot of this competition between Hong Kong and Singapore for as a gateway to doing business in China. All right. And for people who want to consider the possibility of settling down in Singapore, we are also pretty good with taking care of elderly. Our pension scheme is also well funded. We are very strong labor force, and of course, under the aging population structure, definitely we have more people actually retiring later. But generally, the living standards here and the quality of living is pretty high. Okay, so this is just to give you an overview of the population. We're not very big, about 5 million plus, but we definitely have a lot of, sizable foreigners settling down here as well. So overall, there is a fluctuation around there. We have certain government schemes actually to increase the population even more with the infrastructure. Okay, this is the main course that we're coming to. Now, Singapore taxation is pretty much a territorial-based tax system. We don't tax foreign income, all right, under most situations. And only income that is earned in Singapore or received from overseas in Singapore, subject to certain conditions, will be taxed. Other than that, generally, most people are quite comfortable to park their money here, to invest here from overseas. Money that is earned, income that is earned out of Singapore actually will be taxed in Singapore, but that is outside Singapore will not be subject to tax here. All right. And although our corporation tax generally is quite low in this region, our closest competitor is actually Hong Kong with 16.5. But with our tax exemption schemes available, the effective tax rate is even lower than 17. Sometimes it can even go below 10%. Okay, and for individual tax, if let's say you have considerations to actually earn income as a consultant or earn income from your own company here, all right, the annual tax is actually also considered low. The highest bracket of 22%, it only applies for income that's earning 238,000 US dollar a year. So anything less, actually, they have a staggered system. So for the first 20,000, actually, or first 15,000 US dollar, there is no tax exposure. All right, this is our version of VAT, value added tax, at 7%. Now, for companies, registration requirement is not necessarily applied to all companies. All right, only certain companies need to register for this GST or VAT. Okay. Now, one of the good things having Singapore company for most of our clients is that dividends is not taxable in Singapore. Generally, it's exempt from tax. So we do structure businesses with this in mind, that clients may choose to take out dividends from their profits under this one-tier system that we have, which exempt the tax from the shareholders. And these shareholders need not be just locals, foreigners as well. Okay, and we don't have any capital gains tax or inheritance tax. And this is the full tax exemption and tax exemption available for Singapore companies. Later on, I'll show you a bit of the table, the structure, how this exemption applies. Okay, and because to keep up with this wealth management industry, we have a lot of schemes that allows this tax exemption applied under this Section 13. Which effectively, if let's say you have any closed-end or open-end funds using this particular structure, you can apply for the exemption, in which case some of it will be totally exempted from tax. In some cases, the tax rate will only be at 10%. Okay, and we have more than 80 bilateral double tax treaties as well. Okay, now this is a simple diagram to showcase, all right, for people who are concerned about the tax residency issue. If let's say we have a client that set up a Singapore company that is a tax resident, meaning controlled and managed in Singapore. So effectively, even if you're doing offshore businesses, all right, the income will still be taxed in Singapore because you receive them in Singapore, but they will be taxed at a lower rate. All right, lower rate meaning it will be usually less than 17% if you take into consideration the tax exemption allowances. All right, and this is mainly for clients who wants to actually have the concept of settling down, planning their future businesses here in Singapore with substance. So for clients or for people who wish to have their business permanently set up here, okay, with substance, then this is a very good structure to work with. They can also even apply for permanent residence status here as well. But of course, you have to start out with something called an employment pass holder, all right, which I will talk about it later on in the slides. Now, for clients who wish to control their company from overseas, all right, like an offshore company. So this option is also available, all right. We call it a non-tax resident status, whereby the Singapore company is controlled and managed outside. And assuming that you're doing business outside as well, then this is definitely very suitable because totally the income is exempted from tax, even it is recorded and remitted to Singapore. So we have this special section 1025, which allows this income, even if it's received in Singapore, under this kind of structure where it is a non-tax resident, it will not be taxed as well. So it is like a offshore company in this case. Okay. So generally, I think if people are using it for investment holding purposes or for trading purposes, it works both ways. Okay. And definitely, this is something that interests a lot for clients who are considering to use Singapore company as an offshore entity. Okay. So investment structure is quite common as well in Singapore. So we have all these other companies that actually use it for their investment here in terms of IP, in terms of their business and so on. Now, this is a new thing, all right? Totally not effectively, this only started last year, January. So for this particular structure, they're trying to emulate the similar structure that Cayman company uses, all right, for investors to actually use something called a variable capital company, all right, to attract investors to invest in funds. So generally, they can have it as an umbrella, all right, and this umbrella of funds, umbrella structure, we have different kind of sub-funds that is being assigned to different investors. Now, the good thing about this kind of structure is that it's quite clear, all right, how it should be set up, all right. There's government incentives to actually attract wealth fund managers to help clients set up this. Now, I'm going to give you a bit of the highlights. The tax incentive actually is very attractive. They don't tax the income that is earned, okay, for some of these funds. And for those funds that is not covered under this scheme, they are only taxed at 10% at a concessionary rate. And for the setting up fees, the government is actually subsidizing 70% of it, okay? And one of the most interesting part of it is that usually dividends for normal companies, they will usually issue from profits. But under a VCC structure, they actually allow the distribution of the dividends out of capital. All right, so there is a allowance given for this kind of arrangement under this VCC. And of course, if you have you yourself or your clients are using foreign companies that wants to re-domicile to Singapore under a VCC structure, as long as the constitution of the foreign company allows it to be re-domiciled, Singapore can accept it as well. Okay, so generally this is an overview, all right, of the tax rates. Okay, so for corporation tax, as I said, 17%, but effective tax rate can go below that. All right, there's no tax on capital gain, dividends, and foreign source income, not limited to Singapore. For those that's remitted to Singapore, if let's say they qualify for the exemption, then they won't be taxed. For those that doesn't, then they'll be subject to the same corporation tax. Okay, and for those who are pertaining to Russian companies and so on, all right, this is just one example. Okay, if let's say you're dealing with two entities with the withholding tax concern, all right, under our DTA, we do have this preferential treatment where the tax rate is significantly reduced for dividends, for interest, and for royalty. Now, this dividends is referring to dividends paid out of the Russian company, not from the Singapore company. So the Singapore company does not have any dividend withholding tax. Okay, so that's one example how our treaty benefits can materialize in terms of entity between two countries. Okay, now this is the exemption. Generally, I just want to give you an overview how we can reduce the 17% tax rate. So for the first 3 years, all right, if there's any taxable income, any profits made by the company, all right, the exemption applies, all right, for the first 75,000 USD at 75%, all right, and the next 75,000. So up to 93,750 is given as exemption against the taxable income. Okay, then after 3 years, they still continue this, but the quantum is reduced. All right, so from 93,750, they will reduce it to 76. Now, at the moment, this is perpetual, so there is no change. All right, but this is only useful if, let's say, you're considering income to be subject to tax in Singapore. Okay, if let's say you're considering using Singapore company as an offshore entity, then this table doesn't apply because there's no tax on that foreign income. Okay, and this is our value-added tax is at 7%. The registration requirement only applies if your income, your turnover exceeds or is at least 1 million. Okay, so in a year, if you expect the turnover to be 1 million and above, then you have to register under our law, the company for GST. But overseas sales is charged at 0% in any case. All right. But we have various GST schemes to help companies to give them benefits as well. Like some of these schemes on a zero-rated warehouse or export scheme, okay, whereby exporting is 0%, you don't need to pay anything for every 6 months. Okay, then you need to consider paying. All right. So some of these schemes actually is quite useful if, let's say, you're looking at trading business. All right, using Singapore as a base to consider trading with the Asian region. Now, this is the part where I was talking about. If, let's say, you're considering settling down in Singapore, okay. So we have a different scheme to apply to business owners. So if, let's say, you are considering setting up a company in Singapore and doing a business, and you want to be a director and so on, we have something called an employment pass scheme. Okay, so if, let's say, you consider the person to be paid at least 4,500 Singapore dollar or 3,004 US dollar per month, then you can apply for this employment pass. So employment pass allows you to act as a director, and also usually the tax residency of the individual will be tied to Singapore. So under this scheme, basically you are running the business, you are active in the business, and after maybe 2 or 3 years, you can actually apply for the permanent resident status here in Singapore. And another similar scheme is also called an Entry Pass scheme for entrepreneurs as well. Right? These are a little bit different. They are more bigger size, bigger scale business that you're considering to move from your existing jurisdiction to Singapore. Then you're looking at employing quite a number of people of at least 50 to 100. Then this scheme will be very suitable, whereby they will give you certain government incentives to help you offset certain startup costs. Then we have the individual foreigners who wish to actually invest substantially in Singapore in terms of what we call the Global Investors Approved Funds program. These are basically Singapore companies for investment, big companies whereby you're talking about at least US dollar 1.9 million investment scale. Then of course that scheme will give you a so-called a direct application for the permanent resident status. Okay, so generally I just want to give you an idea for a lot of these considerations now with compliance and what OECD has actually rolled out over the years, the action plans to counter this tax avoidance issue. Singapore is actually trying to have a clean image with this tax incentives. At the same time, for companies here, our considered the integrity of the business and the company setup gives very high rating to our clients. Most of them, once they have a Singapore company set up and established well, they have the full support from our local banks, full support from our tax authorities, all right, as well as any of these expansion plans that they have in the region, in Indonesia, be it in Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, or even Hong Kong and China. Now, as a compliance concern, all right, this is a real issue that most of us face currently, okay? And I've been a compliance trainer for the banks for many years, the top financial institutions here in Singapore as well as in Hong Kong. So from time to time, this concern from foreign clients opening bank accounts has always been quite challenging. So definitely we will advise a client how to do it properly, okay? And a lot of this, as you can understand, it involves a lot of this substance, economic substance, business substance. So we do help them with this administrative support as well as the accounting and tax compliance. On top of that, if let's say they need any employment, any HR or office lease rental matters, we also help. In fact, one of those things that we pride ourselves, our business owners, is to help our clients actually do a lot of business collaborations with our own clients. So we have clients in Vietnam, in Indonesia, in Philippines. They actually love working with Europeans clients to expand their business market, for the foreign clients to come to Asia, as well as for Asian clients to go abroad to European countries. So my presentation basically covers pretty much the general scope of the Singapore jurisdiction, right? And what we do at Kaiden Group is actually we provide this one-stop service for all. Over the 10 years of practice, we've come across a lot of cases, and we deal mainly with overseas clients and foreign clients to help them to so-called get settled down with their Singapore company system and so on. Now, to answer some of your concerns about investments in Singapore, to be frank, under the COVID situation now, all right, our cases now in the community is 0. And cases from imported is less than 10. So for the past 5 days to a week now, in fact, our cases have actually come down very significantly. But unfortunately, the travel and the borders are not entirely open. We have just actually have some arrangement with Malaysia and with Hong Kong and China, as well as, if I'm not mistaken, with London on some of the business travels. So we are our government is pretty effective with this control of the COVID situation. And for those that are interested to do investment in commercial properties, actually over the last 6, 7, 8 months, I have to tell you, we don't have any shortage of liquidity here. Property prices are still going up, okay, and demand is still there. In fact, the business usually that is affected pretty much now is those that is dealing, with overseas business because of the closed borders. But domestic demand is very strong, and we still have clients who wants to actually set up business here in Singapore to branch out to the neighboring countries. So you can say that in Asia the situation is not so bad. Especially in Singapore, it's actually pretty good. Although we still have to wear masks in public, but the business sentiment is still strong. And to add on to this is that we hope that the situation will improve even better with the borders opening up, which all of us are actually hoping to travel as very soon as well. All right. So I hope that this presentation will give you some good feel about Singapore jurisdiction. Feel free to ask any questions if you have. So after that, we'll see how we can move forward with this. All right, Dr. Justin, can I hand it over to you? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That was a really, really insightful presentation. Some good insight into Singapore. Seems like you have a very progressive, positive tax structure, and you're very well positioned in Asia. So that was a really, really good presentation.